Are you ready to become a change maker? Our 48-week postgraduate program in public policy or the PGP may be just the thing for you. This hybrid program is designed to give you both the theoretical foundation and hands-on experience needed to excel in policy making. With a mix of expert-led webinars, in-person workshops, and policy simulation exercises, you'll gain real-world skills along with personalized mentorship. Through our policy programs, we connect good people to good ideas and good networks. Apply now at the link in the description to make an impact.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to this episode of All Things Policy, your favorite daily public policy podcast from the Takshashila Institution. I'm Anushka Saxena, a staff research analyst with Takshashila's Indo-Pacific Studies program, and today I have my colleague from the program, Amit Kumar, to talk to me about Indian Prime Minister Modi's recent visit to the United States. For a short span of time and for a 2-day visit and a series of meetings, the bunch of stuff that was agreed upon and discussed was simply too long a list. Right, we saw deliberations on non-traditional areas of security such as climate cooperation, climate change mitigation, sustainability, and of course, we saw more strategic areas of convergence being discussed as well. We saw two initiatives pertaining to military partnership, expanding military partnership called the Compact for the 21st century, as well as an initiative called Trust on building resilience and convergence vis-a-vis strategic technologies. Now, of course, there were also a couple things that were left out that were perhaps expected to be discussed. One, of course, is the jet engine co-production deal when it comes to military affairs, and the ISET, the Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies, was not mentioned as well. And this is just me, right? But Amit, you can weigh in on this later. I do believe that the trust initiative that has been agreed upon kind of encapsulated everything the ISET wants to achieve and more. So with that, Amit, I think I just want to come to you with the first question, which is rather broad and not doesn't necessarily pertain to the visit itself, but to US-India relations under Trump 2.0. There's been a lot of anxiety and question in India about what Trump's second presidency means for us. There's so much certainty anyway with the Trump presidency that we don't know if we should think that the Modi-Trump relationship is just enough to sail the boat, or are there tumultuous waters to face ahead that we don't really know of? So, Amit, your thoughts on the relationship overall? Of course, we understand it's very early days. It's less than a month since Trump's been in office. So, I guess in that sense, it's a good sign that PM Modi visited the US. But what are your broad kind of takeaways on this or predictions on this, Amit?
Yeah, thank you so much, Anushka. I think, Anushka, that's a very valid question. Trump is almost around a month old in his new Trump presidency 2.0. And if you talk about the sense in India, there has been anxiety, and people have been talking about whether this relationship would be as strong as it used to be, or it'll be under some sort of stress now that Trump has come in. And as you said, with Trump, these kind of things happen. The uncertainty that he brings to the table gives rise to these kind of questions. But to answer your question, I'll rather refer to a few conversations that I myself had with some of the American folks and ask them what Trump thinks of America's relationship with India, right? And the sense that I got was, they were very candid about it, and said that the fact that you could see S. Jaishankar sitting in the first row during the swearing-in ceremony of Trump, I mean, that tells you that India was a priority. India was given that kind of priority that it seeks. Second, the fact that you could that India and US could finalize a meeting within 1 month of Trump's presidency uh, 2.0 also tells you the kind of priority that Trump and America uh, attaches to the relationship, right? The third very important point that I kind of which the American folks had was that Modi is one of the leaders that Trump respects. Now, this there was also another comment that they made, and that was Trump also is very looks up to Putin and Xi as statesmen. So that could give you some sense of worry. But the fact is that Trump, unlike other European leaders or leaders of American allies, is sees Modi as someone who he respects. Right. So that is something that will tell you that the India-US relationship is not going to see that kind of headwinds. And lastly, what I want to point out is the fact that India is not an ally of the US. It puts India into an advantageous positions because it does not have to go through the kind of situations that the American allies have to are going through right now, and the constant comments that Trump makes on the allies and the leaders, etc. So, and also the fact that because Trump has this habit of being transactional with its partners, it gives India the right to be transactional, and I think that is very important. So, unlike in the Biden term, where you could, if India tried to be some transaction in its relationship with the US, it created a fear of that might jeopardize the relationship. But the fact that Trump is himself leading a transactional relationship, it also gives India the opportunity to be transactional and maintain the relationship with the US. So I think overall, if you see, the American analyst saw this visit by Modi to America, the US, as quite positive. And I think we don't have to worry too much about the direction of the India-US relationship. The relationship is here to stay, and although there will be some hiccups and some frictions over trade and economy, but largely the relationship will be stable.
Yeah, Amit, fair point. I do understand where you come from when you say that Trump has enabled a lot of its allies to have the quote unquote transactional relationship that you talked about, in the sense that he's always demanding for something in exchange for something else, right? In the mind of Trump, Taiwan's protection must be purchased. The aid to Ukraine must be purchased. I think most recently there were some statements pertaining to Ukraine pitching in a hefty amount of its defense budget as insurance against all the aid and the weapon systems the US has delivered to Ukraine. So these are obviously matters of concern that foster a sense of mistrust and insecurity among these alliances, and then for India to kind of be in that slightly advantageous position where the partnership truly is no expectations, so to say, can be a good thing, can be, as you said, a respectable thing, again, in the mind of Trump, right? But on that last point you brought up about some headwinds or some tensions being there in the trade sector, right? We know Trump's foreign policy agenda, even his domestic agenda, is deeply economically driven, and that could mean him prioritizing American products at the international stage, attempting to, invite others to play a larger role in the American market, as opposed to uh, giving away more in exchange for little, right? So and of course India is one country among many others, not the largest, but one of the countries that the US runs a massive trade deficit with. And in that sense, I think, and this is where we can talk about Modi's visit, and what was agreed upon more in detail. We've seen that the two sides have agreed to a double the trade that they have today to about 500 billion in the next few years, and B, to enter a reciprocal bilateral trade agreement which also can help the two sides mitigate tariff and non-tariff related measures that have been in place for so long. So what are your thoughts on this, Amit? Do you think these bilateral endeavors in enhancing trade are again a good sign, or do they mean something else entirely?
See, given the kind of, our listeners would remember that US is one of the largest trading partners of India. In fact, it briefly replaced China as the largest trading partner a few years back. And around the trade, bilateral trade at this point stands around $100 billion, right? And of this, US maintains a deficit of around $50 billion, if I'm not wrong. And of course, Trump has targeted all those countries with which the US maintains a large trade deficit. And of course, India is on that list. Also, the fact that India does place very high tariff rates, imposes very high tariff rates on the US goods compared to the tariff rates that Indian goods face in America, in the US. I think that calls for, and given the kind of politics that Trump has run so far, the economic nationalism and make America great again, and bringing back manufacturing jobs, etc. It is sensible for Trump to call India out. And that's what he actually did just before the press briefing around an hour ago or something. He did say that India is a massive abuser of tariffs. And that is actually, to be fair, it's true. And therefore, there was anxiety in India whether this will derail the overall, the larger relationship, right? But I think the positive is that what you mentioned, the fact that moments later, they were both the leaders had a very positive outlook of the bilateral trade. They outlined that the bilateral trade has to reach $500 billion by 2030, if I'm not wrong. And the fact that they both agreed to conclude the bilateral trade investment treaty, bilateral trade agreement by the end of this year. I think it's a huge plus. And although Trump has promised reciprocal tariffs, I think for now, that might have delayed, this meeting might have delayed that action from the US. And I think we will see a better, if this deal gets concluded, I think we'll have a smoother economic and trade relationship with the US. And I think this one sticking point in the bilateral relationship will not bother much insofar as the larger India-US relationship is concerned. So it is very important for us to conclude this deal. Oftentimes, we have seen that the government announces that will conclude the deal, but the bureaucracy in India is such that we get stuck and the processes get delayed, and then we eventually find that we exceed the timeline by twice or thrice the time that was initially decided, right? And this is something which is also a worry within the American policy making, right? The bureaucratism in India is really frustrating for them. Also, when it comes to the trade deficit, India has offered to buy more oil and gas from the US, and the US has offered to sell some of its sophisticated military equipments, etc. And that should bring down the trade deficit. But I think the step was in the right direction. The fact that Modi could get the word from the US and they decided that they'll conclude the deal by the end of this year, I think it's a big plus. And I think if we manage to get that, it will be good.
Right. And the thing that you said about bureaucratism and how legislation works in India, I think another point of relief was also the announcement on the 1st of February that as part of the budget proceedings, that India is going to revise the Civil Nuclear Liability Damage Act. And as part of that, I think the big win for the India-US partnership is civil liability when it comes to co-production of civil nuclear facilities in India. This has been a subject of debate since the 123 agreement was signed many years ago, and 20 years ago to be precise. And now, this announcement, it almost seems like it was a deliberate precursor to the Modi Trump meeting, and it's smoothened the way to discuss civil nuclear liability and kind of get away with that thorn in the
Yeah,
road.
absolutely agree.
Yeah. And You talked about things that Trump said at a press briefing before the event, and he said India is a big abuser of tariffs. One of the other things he said that I'd like to ask you about, again in a very nonchalant manner, was that he's really upset about the skirmishes on the border, and he finds them to be quite vicious, and he'd love to help India out so as to be able to stop them. Now, Amit, we've discussed about this several times at Takshashila, that India US convergence vis a vis this mutual China challenge in the past few years is real, and it's important to keep both the US's Indo Pacific theater emphasis going. And it's also important for us because we can, in India, the security apparatus can feel like it has some support, if not with troops on the ground, with military support, exchange of know-how, and of course intelligence, right? So do you think under Trump the India China relationship is going to be a priority? And do you also again really think that it is the case that India's security calculus should factor in support from the US when dealing with China?
India China as a priority for India or the US?
The US.
See, of course, as I mentioned initially, I mean, during my opening, when I opened my remarks, Trump is one person who wants to impress both Xi and Putin as a statesman. And therefore, you always see, and this is always the case with Trump. Even last time when he had come to power, he had projected himself as a deal maker, right? And he badly wants to conclude deals that would pave way for peace and security, as you would like to call it. And I think there's a certain flair with how Trump speaks and presents himself. I think it was not something which was sanctioned by the Trump administration, but he said it anyway and offered to settle the dispute between India and settle, because he said it's violent and it's something that he doesn't like. And yeah, it would, if India and China would allow for it, he would be happy to help them and reach a some sort of agreement. Of course, India was not. I mean, you saw the Indian foreign ministry come out later and said that the issue between India and China is a bilateral one, and they would not be happy with any sort of intervention that sort. But given that, having said that, I think I don't think we should read much into that. The India-China relationship will remain thorny and problematic for the coming years. And given the fact that you have Marco Rubio and Waltz as two China hawks in the Trump administration, I think China is still, there is a bipartisan consensus that China is a threat and it has to be countered. And the administration understands it, but it's just the way how Trump conducts himself. And therefore, you see a bit of these statements wherein he may seem like he wants to cut a deal. And that's also something which has been floated, that the US and China, the Trump wants to cut a deal with China. But I want to emphasize that cutting a deal with China does not mean the relationship between the two have been course corrected, and that they'll be bereft of any structural problems. It's similar to what we concluded with the Chinese. That's It's a deal to manage a difficult relationship, and therefore, even if some sort of deal is reached between the US and China, I think the nature of the structural relationship is such that they'll continue to be long time rivals and an enemy, and I think that plays in our favor, right? So I don't think we have much to read into that.
Yeah, and I think that same logic also applies to the India China relationship, because, again, it's a structural one. Trump may not like something, Biden may not like something else, but doesn't mean that any of their interventions would be enough to remove some of the challenges that come with this difficult relationship, which, by the way, is also very different from the difficult relationship the US and China share, because, well, China's right on India's borders, right? It's right at its doorstep. Um, Amit, I think one final point of discussion that I'd like to bring up before we conclude this episode is on defense. And, defense and security becomes kind of an obvious segue when we talk about the India China relationship and skirmishes on the border. We do know that. India and the US have a flourishing defense partnership. We know that most of India's exports to the US comprise defense equipment and components, may it be helicopter radars, turbo shafts, so on and so forth, right? And even from the US, we have uh, unmanned combat aerial vehicles on rent. We've imported naval gas turbines from them, so on and so forth. So the exchange of technical and technological know-how in the defense space is simply too high, and now we have this compact for military partnership, which means that the two sides are going to be uh, focusing on even more flourishing partnership on defense. And in this light, we've also seen Trump make the statement that he's willing to sell F-35 jets to India. So on this front again, Amit, do you think this is just a component in Trump's broader kind of propagation of America's production capabilities and America's defense exports, or do you think there really is to this there is really something to this security cooperation on a deeper level?
See, ever since the policymakers in India and the decision makers in India were acknowledged that their dependence on Russian military hardware was massive, I think there was a shift from 2010 onwards, and more specifically from 2014 onwards, to diversify its defense procurements and defense imports. And US has been a major uh, partner in that sense, and also I think emerged as the top defense destination of top defense imports for Indian defense equipments. I think it also left behind. I mean, in the recent years, if you see the cumulative size, US has emerged as the largest defense partner for India when it comes to defense equipments. And one of the and when it comes to F-35, this time Trump has offered, and the Trump administration has offered India to sell F-35s to that. And you very well know that India has been having this problem with uh, in decreased number of squadrons, right? And India does need F-35. And earlier, I think the F-17s and 22 were on the menu, but they were never offered. They never offered F-35 to India. I think the fact that they have offered F-35 this time to India, it does not. India does not need to buy it, but it's very similar to what the nuclear deal did. I mean, it's still not a deal, but it's an offer. But very similar to what they did. It did not matter if India bought any nuclear reactors, or US sold any nuclear reactors to India. What mattered was the intention and the signaling. And the signaling from this is that US is prepared to share some of its most sophisticated defense equipments with India. And F-35 is, I think, one of the best sixth generation
Foremost models.
fighter aircrafts. And the fact that US has offered to sell it to India also signals you that India, despite not being an ally of the US, and a key defense partner with STA1 authorization, US is ready to sell its most sophisticated defense equipments, and that really tells the depth of the defense relationship between the two countries.
Right. Thanks for that, Amit. This has been a very fascinating conversation. Of course, on the note that I started, I'd like to reiterate it again, which is that, again, this is very early days. We still have the Quad Leaders Summit coming up in India. Both sides at the Modi-Trump meeting also affirmed that they support the Quad and the Indo-Pacific. So, again, I think that's a good thing. But they also have a very ambitious, as you said, menu to achieve when it comes to cooperation through the Quad. And some of the fields that they talked about include cyber, aerospace, resilience and sustainability, so on and so forth, right? So I think it remains to be seen to what extent the partnership can again go. We still have to, as you said, see the completion of the bilateral trade agreement. So there's lots to look forward to, and perhaps maybe we can come back to another conversation on all things policy to take cues and discuss the Trump-Modi relationship and the India-US relationship further. So thank you so much, Amit, and thank you to our listeners for tuning into this episode of All Things Policy.
Thank you, Anushka.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle @Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.